And at this time, I would like to welcome Dan Hilton, the host of the Barcelona podcast on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, on Blue Wire, everywhere you get your podcast from. Dan, first of all, thank you so much for joining VMFC. And let me ask you this. How did you become a fan of arguably one of the most successful teams in the last 10 years, FC Barcelona?
Well, I grew up playing soccer. Well, in the States, that's what I grew up playing the sport. And in the States, Liga, even Champions League wasn't really available on our television sets. So the rare times I was able to see anything was Thierry Henry playing at Arsenal. And like almost anyone who was playing soccer from 2001 to 2004-ish, I mean, they loved Thierry Henry. He was my guy. And so when he went to Barcelona, I'd also been playing with Barcelona with the days of Ronaldinho on FIFA. I was a teenager, very impressionable at the time. So I like their color scheme. Barcelona is a city that has my heart. And so once we went to Barcelona, it was a done deal, 100% on board since then. And I guess it's not really a magical fairy tale story. My co-host, Francesc Tomas, born and raised in Barcelona. He is a Catalan. His brother played for the academy back in the day with Andres Iniesta. So he is even more connected to it. But I find that digging deep as an adult has been just as fun for me.
Wow. So he actually had the experience of being in the famous La Masia.
Yeah, well, his brother played with Andres Iniesta in the academy, and he played locally.
Okay.
So he never made the academy like his brother did, but his brother was there for a hot minute with Andres Iniesta. But
wow.
It's certainly he was up close, free tickets to the stadium all the time, born right outside the city. So he has a full experience.
Wow. Well, that's awesome, man. You have pretty close ties to Barcelona then. It's I mean, I can definitely tell you this: Barcelona as a city. Never been there. I don't know if you have, but Barcelona as a city seems incredibly, incredibly fascinating. Just the culture, the architecture, and of course, us being soccer fans, we have to go to Camp Nou at some point, right?
Yeah. Well,
yeah, go ahead.
The club, FC Barcelona, and Antoni Gaudi, the famous architect from Barcelona, you see the club and Gaudi all throughout the city. His fingerprints and then the fingerprints of FC Barcelona are just everywhere there. And to say how much have I ever been there, I've been there as much so on my honeymoon, which it's someone I always recommend. If you're a fan of the team, it's not so difficult to convince your significant other, especially if you love Barcelona as much as I do, to get to a game. So we were able to see a game on our honeymoon, but we're also there a week. So there was so much other things to do, obviously. We didn't even go to the beach. We were there almost a whole week, and we didn't even go to the beaches in Barcelona. We did everything else because it's just a magnificent city, that I recommend. But
that is incredible, man. I'm very jealous of you. I wish I could go to Barcelona soon. Actually, real quick before we get into like the actual the topics that we were going to talk about, my brother plays for the academy, for the Barcelona Academy here in Chicago, and he was supposed to go to a tournament in Barcelona in April. Yep. And of course, that all fell through. And you can imagine how he felt when he got the news that it was a no-go. So, he was going to go to Barcelona.
It wasn't even a disappointment. I mean, I understand disappointment from the students, especially obvious the athletes. But I know there's also a lot of different. There were some issues with funds and what happened with refunds, and so I'm hoping that the club and everything can be straightened out with all that. I know it was surely a mess, but it is simply just one of many, many things that this pandemic has obviously ruined and made a mess of.
Absolutely. And speaking of this entire mess that's going on right now, I want to get your thoughts a little bit on the Spanish league. And we know that some of the teams have already began training. Real Madrid, Barcelona, the two big teams in Spain have already resumed their training. And it looks like we might be able to see some Spanish soccer next month. Do you think we will actually be able to see it? Or at the last minute, they're going to be like, you know what, this is not safe. We're not going to do this.
Yeah, well, Alex, I told you, I'm going to try to say I don't know with as many ways as possible, try to back up some of those arguments. I think we start here as much as we're starting in Spain. I think everything begins with the Bundesliga. How the Bundesliga is able to get this off the ground, if they're able to actually have matches and make it work, then that basically becomes the template. That becomes the system, and everyone else is going to try to follow suit. However, you and I both in the United States are well aware that sports as they go, it is not just even one league or one country. I mean, money does matter, but each country is almost dealing with its own challenges and its own issues. And there are Liga players, 5 between the top division and the second division, that have tested positive for COVID-19. So, I mean, what are you supposed to do? Are you going to just have those players sit out for 2 weeks for an extended amount of time? Do they just almost gloss over the fact that the players could be asymptomatic and they test for antibodies, which I don't see that being a solution here. Yeah, I mean, the French league has already declared a winner with PSG. It might have been a foregone conclusion, but same thing with the Eredivisie. They just said there is no champion, and they finished a closed up shop in Netherlands. And I mean, that probably is the best decision, but there's so much money on the line, and it's not just Barca and Real Madrid, but there's so much money on the line with the Bundesliga and the Liga, and the ones that, this is no disrespect to the Eredivisie, but they don't necessarily have that global broadcasting deal. There's just so much money on the line for the Liga and the Premier League and the Bundesliga that there's going to be a lot of money left on the table if they're unable to play these last 11 match days. I mean, and the same thing for the Champions League, which, I mean, at least the Champions League, they're going to say, okay, in August, because you're dealing with so many different countries and you have, just intercontinental, well, not intercontinental, but you have continental travel, that there's, again, so many challenges when you're dealing with different borders, and what's happening in every single country is different.
Yeah, and it makes it a logistical nightmare too, that they still have 11 match days to go, like you said. And they're aiming to finish by the end of June, maybe end of July. That's a lot to fit into such a short amount of time. That's why this rule of... Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's supposed to be about 4 matches almost per week. They say there's supposed to be a match every single day, at least, throughout about those months. And right now they're aiming to start around June 12th to June 21st is the key. But just how it is with, at least for on the Barcelona podcast, our policy is always that until the player is holding up that jersey, and the same thing is going to be for this, until they're actually kicking off, I cannot believe that it's going to be starting.
That's a very good that's a good philosophy to have, if you can call it that, because everything is so maybe 50-50, it could happen, or it's probably not going to happen. Nothing is for sure right now. Nothing is for sure. So that's a good way of seeing this. And you said that this kind of goes for like the transfers and the rumors and all that stuff as well, right?
Well, see, the thing is about content during COVID-19, as you know best, that things happen. So it's, I was talking to Sam Marsden, who's the ESPN correspondent, last week, and he was basically saying that there are definitely rumors that you take seriously, like a Lautaro Martinez and even Neymar. You have to take that seriously simply because of the words that Messi has said, what's coming from the board, what comes from Mundo Deportivo in sport, which does have some kind of association with the club itself. Let's say the leaks and the sources are there's something to those. And so there are ones you take seriously, and then there are the other ones, and this doesn't go for just Barcelona, it goes for everybody, that you look at rumors and you say, why would this player from the Polish first division that's left back be a transfer target for Barcelona? And you think, oh, his contract is up in 2021 and his agent is trying to get him a better deal. So it takes about 2 seconds of Googling to debunk some of those rumors, but it's what happens.
We'll definitely talk about that towards the end of this interview. But first, of course, there was a season played a few months ago. There was action. It feels like there wasn't, but there definitely was action within these last few months. And I want to get your thoughts on Barcelona's season as a whole from August of 2019 until March of 2020, that including their transfers. Of course, they had one massive transfer back in July. The coaching change that happened early in 2020, just the way that they were playing, just your overall thoughts on Barcelona and how you felt about them as a team right before this whole thing just completely ended.
Yeah, I think it is obviously 2 parts. And when you change a manager midway through, there are 2 chapters of your season, obviously, where the Quique Setién era, if you will, honestly, it didn't get far enough along to really give a final grade, if you will. But I know for the Ernesto Valverde part of it, there was certainly a feeling that it was going to be his last season. I mean, we had been saying for a long time that any manager, no matter how much success you have at Barcelona or even Manchester United, these top clubs, 3 years is about as long as you can go, right? I mean, Jose Mourinho is the one who made it famous, but 3 years is about what it is. And that was Ernesto Valverde's 3rd year. And you could feel that he probably should have been let go after Roma. he definitely should have been let go after Liverpool and still survived on. And it certainly was not the brand of football, the brand of soccer that fans want to see. And so things got very negative in my mentions, in notifications, right? Things got pretty volatile, and the club just was not playing the way they should have. And there was definitely a feeling, I think, from everybody that if something didn't change around January, that even though results were there, right, that Barca at this moment are still 2 points atop the La Liga table. They're still in the Champions League, right? They crashed out of the Copa del Rey, but so did Real Madrid, and we're going to have an all-Basque Copa del Rey final if we ever get it. But anyway, so I mean, Barcelona was still available in two of the in the three big trophies, and yet it didn't feel like it was a successful season, right? It just felt like the air had come out of the building, that it just, things were not clicking. And then in that, I mean, what was a torrid week, you find out that Luis Suarez winds up going down what was supposed to be for the rest of the season. And then they don't sign anybody in January. Then Dembele goes down for the rest of the season. And then the Martin Braithwaite transfer happens. But yeah, I mean, it was an interesting season because the results tell you that they're having success. And for almost any other club, give it a thumbs up to the season. But the standard at Barca, and you can't tell the fans otherwise. I've tried a million times. The Culés, their standard is so high that my hope is that we've ended on a higher note, and we'll see if football does come back for the rest of the season. You're looking at an entirely different team. You're looking at a healthier and thinner Luis Suarez. Dembele probably still won't be back, but I mean, Messi was I think he was dealing with a nagging injury for at least the last month and a half of the season. But obviously he's going to play through it. But I think he was having some issues, and now in theory he's going to be healthy and fit too. So I don't know. I think the season is for Barcelona. It's always trophies that decide whether or not you had success or not, but also how well they played on the field. So they didn't really play too great this year, and we'll see if the trophies follow.
You touched on a lot of very important things, and the one that stood out the most was definitely the fact that Barcelona has not been playing the same, has not been playing well. At least to the eyes of Barcelona fans, and especially when Ernesto Valverde was the manager, when he was in charge. And it all just feels, as of a few years ago, it all just feels like the team depends on one player. I think we know who that player is. It's pretty obvious who it is.
Right.
What do you think Barcelona, whoever it may be, the players, the manager, what do you think they have to do to stop depending so much on Lionel Messi? What do you think has to happen?
I thought you were talking about Neto, the backup goalkeeper. I was confused by your
I got
question.
you there. I got you.
So Messi dependency it's a tough thing. It's a tough pill to swallow. And I think there are seasons where, and I've done extensive numbers on it, but there were seasons where you look at even the Tata Martino year, which, I mean, I think he's a good manager. Again, I'm a little biased when I defend him in his time at Atlanta United. I'm not so fond of whatever the Mexican national team, how he's doing there, but his season at Barcelona didn't go great, right? He was put in charge because he was supposed to be a Messi whisperer, right? It was, I think that whole situation, you look from Guardiola, it is a timeline. You have to look at life linearly because that's what it is, right? You see the success he had under Pep Guardiola when he moves to the false nine, and I think he was messy before that, but then he was super messy and became who he is now. But then Tito Villanova, when all of that happened and he passes because he has stepped down because of cancer, and then passes, it certainly, we even see a change there, not in the team, but even within Messi. But I think the Messi under Ernesto Valverde was potentially even the best Messi we've ever seen. He's just refined so much. He's improved his free kicks. He's just such a complete player. He's not as quick as he was, but he's still quicker than 99 out of 100 players. Yet, he has a hard time with that 100th player to be able to skip by them. But I think the argument too that this team in a whole relies so much on Messi, it is true that certainly the midfield of, we're going to go with Artur, even though I don't know if he's going to survive the transfer window, but we're talking Artur, Frankie de Jong, and Sergio Busquets in theory as that starting midfield. And as we talked to Ronald de Boer on the show yesterday, former Barcelona player, a current Ajax youth coach, and his whole thing about Frankie de Jong was that this is just year one, and de Jong is not going to score goals. Sure, he probably does fit when he's 25 and 27 in his prime, and he's replaced Busquets as a defensive midfielder. He's still not going to be scoring goals. But I think I do have a lot of confidence in the future of goal scoring at Barcelona, whether it's Ansu Fati, I really like Pedri, who played in Las Palmas in the second division. I think you're still 3-4 years away from him. Fati's 17 years old. I mean, what are we talking about here, right? And Luis Suarez, I think if they are able to bring in a Lautaro Martinez and transition Luis Suarez into almost that, that super sub off the bench, which he said he's willing to do for maybe a year or two, and Dembele can get back to, I don't know, I always try to find wood to knock on, but if Dembele could, if he could play more than 60, 70% of a season, I do think there is an attacking punch there. And I think that this is a team that has to be overhauled, but I think it's age, not even dependence on Messi. I not to dodge your question, but I think PK, Alba, Busquets, Messi, Suarez, you're looking at a squad that really is in its twilight, and they have to get younger and make tough decisions. And it's impossible to phase out the legends as a group, right? Xavi got faded out slowly. Iniesta got phased out slowly, and Iniesta could have done one or two more seasons if he wanted. So it's just phasing out that older group, just getting younger and faster and pressing once more to play Barcelona style.
Well, yeah, I didn't even think about the age factor where Gerard Piqué has to be close to his mid-30s. Jordi Alba isn't that young anymore. So, yeah, that's definitely a really big factor as to why maybe Barcelona hasn't been functioning as well as we're used to seeing them. But then again, I feel like something that we're all guilty of is we see this Barcelona or whichever Barcelona we were seeing, and we compare it to the 2008, 2009 Barcelona, the 2010, 2011 Barcelona with Pep Guardiola, those machines that just so happen to play soccer. And it's no comparison because those teams are just way high up here. And everyone else, they're really good players, but there was just something that clicked with that Barcelona side, with those Barcelona sides, because it was really 2 seasons of just incredible play. And it's not fair to the teams right here. You even mentioned it a few minutes ago, where these teams, these Barcelona teams, had they been any other team, just imagine Arsenal, for example. Arsenal, they have like 2 or 3 Premier League titles in the last 5 seasons. We wouldn't hear the end of it from Arsenal fans. We would not hear the end of it. But with Barcelona, it's not the same. So they definitely have to renew themselves a little bit, and definitely it's a good opportunity in the transfer window, which we're going to talk about right now. I know we talked about your policy where until they have the jersey, you're not really gonna make any comments, or you're not gonna believe it. But we know that Barcelona was headed for a very busy summer in this transfer window. Do you still think that Lautaro Martinez, maybe even Neymar, can potentially join Barcelona despite all of this chaos that's going around in the world, and especially in the Spanish league and in Barcelona?
I think that's actually one of the few things that we do know, that financially, and it's not just Barca, it's every club around the world, their financial picture is going to be different. So if Barcelona were planning, and it's interesting too, because you have to look at the presidential elections that were scheduled for 2021. They lost half the board as well. So I'm not really sure if this board would take on a big sporting project like that and overhaul anything, even though that's what the fans and socios were clamoring for. I don't know if that was ever going to happen. But all that said, the funds that were allocated to potentially fill in maybe 2 or 3 different positions is probably just going to be, now we're talking about Lautaro Martinez with the swap, and you're no longer talking about multiple players. I think Neymar, as Sam Marsden and pretty much anybody in the know has said, that money just isn't available. The players, and not even the players, but fans are going to continue to clamor. Obviously, that's also the name that sells papers. So as much as the policy might be at the jersey, we talk a lot about Neymar coming back because it's something that the club has said they want to do, but I just don't see how that is possible in the era of COVID-19. And then all that said, this is also too with Barca. I think the biggest critique I have of the club overall, even whether we're talking about things on the field or managers or whatever it is, some of the transfer moves that they've made in recent seasons have been, and the comparison is always to Real Madrid. It's on the field and off it. That Real Madrid has Martin Odegaard. They took Takefusa Kubo because they offered him just 1 million more, and they were able to take him right from Barca. He was a guy who was in La Masia's academy. Now he's the most promising players in the world, Japan's next star. And yet Real Madrid, they seem to have done their post Cristiano Ronaldo homework, and they're trying to rebuild, and maybe it'll work. But for Barca, Messi's a few years younger, but they really are still holding on to the vestiges of, as you mentioned, that the Guardiola, when this team was at its peak. And it's very difficult. I mean, look at Manchester United again. I mean, Barca, if they go through some dark days ahead because they made some bad decisions in the transfer market, Coutinho is, I mean, they had to use the Neymar money, Dembele, whoever you want to say. If those dark days are ahead, it became because the sporting project wasn't prepared to cut bait with the likes of PK and the legends. And I don't think there is any easy answer to that. But you look at the summer when they brought in Andre Gomes, and I mean, on that summer, even TT, you can't say is an A+ signing. He's he's a B signing, right? B-. He was great in his first season. Then he goes to the World, or 2 seasons later, he goes to the World Cup on bad knees, and he's never been the same player. Now he's always out with knees or calf, and those complications don't get any easier, obviously, on your knees. So that summer, Andre Gomes, Paco Alcacer, they failed in bringing all those 23-year-olds or 24-year-olds in. It didn't work out, and now they're trying to hit the reset button again. But as I said, I don't think this board this summer was going to do that anyway, but COVID-19 makes that it makes it zero. It means you might see Lautaro Martinez, and maybe they try to get a bargain player. But, on our show, I'm constantly yelling about John-Claire Todibo, who's a player that nobody knows about, but he's going to go for 25 million because the club needs money. And that's what they're going to do. They're going to cash in on this player, a player I think is really promising. And then in 2 or 3 years, they will worry about, we don't have enough center backs. Or maybe even next year they'll have to worry about it. But, that's next year's problem. So they need the 25 mil now.
Yeah. And you mentioned bargain players, and you mentioned Lautaro Martinez. I was reading into this rumor that maybe Juventus' Miralem Pjanic could join Barcelona. I looked at it and I'm like, why? Why does Barcelona need more midfielders? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree? Do you think he would be a good signing for Barcelona?
That's the example. Pjanic is the perfect example of the whole if he has the jersey thing, right? Because Lautaro Martinez and Neymar are actual. There's real life things to that, and I think that Pjanic, he's coming in. We are basically going through this time without football, and it feels like we're going through the same kind of transfer news cycle. We're now in the crazy days, right? We've had on Lautaro Martinez. That's who they keep talking to. How many stories can how many can they continue to produce? Of Lautaro Martinez, and now you look at a guy like Pjanic, and I just don't see why that makes any sense. And maybe it's just that he's trying to get more money or trying to take this Barcelona interest and turn that into a new contract with Juve. I think that is much more likely.
Yeah, that's. Just soccer-wise, it doesn't make much sense. As I'm looking at my screen, my camera might have died, but my microphone didn't. I'm still there. It just doesn't make sense. I don't think it would make sense like on the pitch, but again, if they can somehow make it work business-wise, then so be it.
The last thing I'll add to that is that I think that there is something going on, and Marzin even alluded to this, that there is something going on with Artur, that it seems like there is a reputation of Brazilians, particularly Brazilians at Barcelona, that when they have a bit of success, Ronaldinho, Romario, Rivaldo, you can name almost all of them, that there is Neymar, there is a little bit of fun that they like to have off the field. And it seems like he has rubbed someone at Barcelona or a few people at Barcelona the wrong way. And as much as he is 23 and a very promising player, it seems like they're getting on him about weight. And if they're a team that's going to transition to wanting to press again and wanting all their players to be in peak physical condition, he just doesn't have the kind of clout that Romario and Rivaldo and these forwards, of Ronaldinho, Ballon d'Or winner, he just doesn't have the clout that these guys do. So I think there might be something else going on with why you're hearing Artur's name pop up so often. And maybe they are indeed just looking to get in another experienced midfielder. And but Pjanic isn't really a goal scorer. That if they're going to go for a midfielder, they need to go for a midfielder that does what Arturo Vidal and Paulinho before him do. They have to get a midfielder that's going to, I guess, add a little bite. I think that's a little overplayed. Xavi, Iniesta, just cut off the passing angles and press and work hard. It works. I mean, you don't have to win every 50-50 ball, but when it comes to Vidal and Paulinho in those late runs into the box and just getting a little bit of scoring punch from the midfield, that's what you want to see. And if they don't think that Artur can do that, again, I don't know why. I mean, Pjanic, one of his best qualities is taking free kicks. I mean, it seems like that Barcelona already have a player to take the free kicks. I don't see why maybe they're looking for a backup, but he's also age-wise doesn't make any sense. That's a final point that, he's over 30. So, what are you trying to do? Trying to make a club younger. So I don't know. We haven't even talked about that on the podcast because I'm not there yet with it.
Honestly, I hope you never have to talk about it on the podcast because it doesn't make any sense, man. It just doesn't make any sense. But one more before I let you go. Obviously, you mentioned the presidential elections that were supposed to happen in 2021, and we've heard from former president of Barcelona, Joan Laporta, saying that if he were to get elected, he would try his best to bring in Pep Guardiola and relive those glory days from 10, 12 years ago. I mean, talk about just pumping a lot of air into the building and making people get hopeful. I personally don't think that would happen. But I don't know. Would you like to see Pep Guardiola at Barcelona again?
Well, I don't think that's the question we're really asking here, right? Is that would we like to see Laporta back in charge as the president? And what are the promises that he's going to make that he's going to keep, right? That when you look all the way back to Florentino Perez, he made his bed with Luis Figo, and he was either going to get Luis Figo and put Barcelona back in the dark ages, which they did, or he was going to not get the presidency. And with Laporta, he basically made these big promises last time in his last failed bid. He did try before to get reelected, and it didn't work out so well. And that's why Bartomeu is still in charge. But I don't know. It seems like socios and we'll say the ones that are going with the font Xavi, there seems to be a growing contingent that there is support behind Font and Xavi, and Laporta is going to try to use name recognition and come in late. I mean, we're not even talking about football. We're talking about politics. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about politics within the city of Barcelona as socios. They're the ones that that you have to get the vote. So, I mean, it doesn't matter what anybody outside of Barcelona who's not a socio or socios around the world have to say about who's going to be the next president, because they're the ones who have to decide. But I think for Laporta, I think he has some big grand ideas. If he could get Guardiola back, I mean, this would be the time, right? Because Manchester City, I mean, don't forget that Manchester City's in a little bit of trouble. Mm-hmm. I don't know if anything's actually going to happen to that, because if you're PSG or Man City, it's really easy to use a few dollars to get yourself out of trouble. But if something does happen to Man City, and you see maybe a Kevin De Bruyne exodus, something like that, not to Barca, but Pep has said he's going to stay at Man City through it. And all his comments lend himself to not returning to Barcelona until after his managing career is over. So I really do think that there might be a bit of faith put into Quique Setien and Xavi. I mean, again, where there's smoke, there's fire. And Xavi being Barcelona's next manager, we're starting to see the blazes. We almost did with Eric Abidal in January, having gone all the way to Qatar as Ernesto Valverde is still managing a match. So definitely there's quite a bit of fire there. But how long are they going to give Quique Setien to try to enact his project and then hand the reins over to Xavi? I think that's more likely. And I think Laporta might even change his tune to try to do the president bid. But I would say that and even Bartomeu, nobody on the board has said that they're going to rerun. So it really could be Font versus Laporta. And it's going to be interesting to see, as with any politics, which one takes on the establishment candidate, because Font has been steadfast in saying that he is trying to be not necessarily the current establishment, but he is being the guy that's, repping, we'll say, the Catalan identity of Barcelona and trying to recapture what it was about the Guardiola era that was so special.
Yeah, and just like in any other political contest, they'll say anything to get the vote. I mean, that's really how it works. But yeah, man, thank you so much for doing this. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your insight. Definitely very interesting, all the points that you touched on. I'm pretty sure the people that are listening to this learned a couple of things from this show that we did. Once again, thank you so much. If you want to plug away your social media, your podcast, I know I kind of did it at the top of the show, but go ahead. The floor is yours.
Well, I say it at the end of every show. We are everywhere you can find your podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you said at the start, but wherever, Overcast, all the different places you can do. If you want to watch it on YouTube, we have a YouTube channel, The Barcelona Podcast. Every weekday, other than the podcast, I also do a special, maybe it's a history of Barcelona, maybe it's something about just Messi de Vencia. We talk about all the different things on the YouTube channel. We're on Facebook. We have a closed Facebook listener group where we get questions. We do a lot of listener question shows. Again, we're on Twitter at the Barcelona Pod, at Hilton D13 for me, on Instagram at the Barcelona Pod. We also have a Patreon where you can help continue to make the shows. And during the season, we do quick take match reviews over there. So there's so much content. I think the places to start would just be to find the podcast wherever you listen to your podcast. Head over to YouTube, give us a like, give us a subscribe. Start there. Then our website's also barcablog.com. So there's a lot going on. Even though there's no football. So we're working hard. But Alex, I appreciate you having me on as well. And I have to give a compliment to you just to wrap this up that my man's wearing a Johan Cruyff 14 Ajax. So again, Ronald de Boer yesterday was talking about Ajax. They're a club that does it the right way. And I would love if Barcelona went back to doing it the way that Ajax does it. So plenty of respect there.
Well, I appreciate the compliment. And hopefully Barcelona does eventually get it right and they get it together, hopefully very soon, sooner than later. Once again, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for listening, for watching. You already know what to do. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Alex Perez FC. Follow the show at Veterans Minimum. Subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts and on Spotify, Veterans Minimum. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that'll do it. Thank you all so much. I appreciate the time. Take care. Goodbye. If you enjoyed this video, remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel for more sports content. If you want to support the brand, you can go ahead and donate $1 to our Patreon, patreon.com/veteransminimum. That will get you exclusive content and merch.